with one of our guests. We're in the company of Pierre Duval, Jean-Baptiste Djebari, and Chris Yates, who is with us from Manchester. Chris, that last question there put forth by the reporter about technical issues at Heathrow, is that just routine stuff?
It's probably routine stuff, but we don't know. The announcement from Germany just then didn't make clear that there'd been anything related to Heathrow. He just stipulated quite clearly that a safety check had been done in Düsseldorf, and the aircraft itself had received a clean bill of health.
Okay. All right, let's cross over now. We just heard in that press conference the CEO of Lufthansa say, we're very sure we can find out the cause as soon as we've retrieved the 2 black boxes. We know we have one of them. We don't know about the other. Let's cross to Ben Barnier, who is at the scene where those rescue helicopters have been taking off and landing all day to reach the crash site in the southern French Alps. Ben, night has fallen where you are. Tell us what's the latest, first of all.
Well, as you just said, I had been hearing and seeing helicopters flying back and forth right behind me on the field, cleared out for the landing of the official helicopters this afternoon. But this has stopped, I would say, about 30 minutes ago, and we are no longer seeing helicopters flying to the site of the crash, probably meaning that the investigation has been halted for the night. Now, I also saw earlier and towards the end of the afternoon trucks with probably containers with some of the samples, probably body parts brought back from the site of the crash.
And we heard in that press conference families that are trying to converge on the area.
Absolutely. We haven't had access to the families. They were protected by local authorities here who were trying to make sure that they could come here to Seyne-les-Alpes, this small remote village of the French Alps, so the families of the victims could get here and grieve as peacefully as possible. I saw some of them personally just behind the windows of minivans, and they were converging to Vernet, which is a town just outside of Seyne-les-Alpes, where I am standing for the official ceremony and meeting with the European leaders, François Hollande, Angela Merkel, and Mariano Rajoy.
Ben, earlier our correspondent Jessica Saltz in Alton am See was talking about, the whole world media converging on this small German town of 37,000, the scene where that classroom, that tragic, those 16 kids and their 2 teachers who won't be coming back to school. I guess you could say for Seyne-les-Alpes, where you are, it's also a case of a tiny town suddenly thrown in the spotlight.
Absolutely, with hundreds of journalists, not just from France, but from all across Europe, parts of America and Asia as well, since some of the victims now we are hearing were Americans, others from several parts of Europe. Now, of course, you could almost qualify this town as a one-horse town, since it's not one of the big fancy resorts in the Alps, the better-known towns of Megève, Avoriaz. So this is clearly a small village, and people have been following closely what's happening here. Some of them excited to see the president here and other European leaders in their town. Others as well offering to open their homes for those among the families of the victims that would like to extend their stay here and get to see much more of the area where their relatives died.
All right, I want to thank you for that. Ben Barnier reporting to us live from Seyne-les-Alpes, one mountainside away from where that crash is, in a very remote area to access. Pierre Duval, again, getting back to the plane, this Airbus A320. we're still grappling with why it suddenly lost altitude, and I'm still hearing debate over whether or not 6 to 8 minutes between the time it falls down from 38,000 feet to the time when it crashes, is it a short space of time or a long space of time?
It's a very long space of time. It's 9 minutes, because we've seen the trajectory on the screen today, and it's 9 minutes and 28,000 feet down, and that's a real long time.
What does that tell you?
You know, either nobody was at the control at this time, or everything was so cloudy inside with some kind of fires or whatever that people could not act properly. But you know,
and at 38,000 feet, correct me if I'm wrong, the plane is usually on automatic pilot.
That's right, usually on automatic pilot and on auto thrust, which means the aircraft is driven by the engines themselves, according to what you actually computed in the plane, and the autopilot is following the actual flight plan. 8 minutes, it's a long time, but not so long. If you are going for a decompression and you want to gain low altitude very quickly, you will aim at descending at something like 10,000 feet a minute, and it would take maybe 4 to 5 minutes. So it's a bit in between the rapid descent and the normal descent, which makes it a bit hard to appreciate, really.
Everybody looks for a precedent when they see a crash like this one. Is there a precedent? Does it resemble another air disaster that you can think of?
Not to my knowledge, to be honest.
the Greek one with the slow.
It was a bit different. The Greek one was a depressurization.
Tell us about that.
Maybe very quickly, it was a 737 operating a regional airline. And basically what happened is we had what we call slow depressurization, which because one of the buttons were remained, the valve was open. And what happened very insidiously, the pilots and the passengers passed out without noticing anything. And so at some point the aircraft leveled off and flight its normal path, ran out of fuel, and start descending. But that's because basically they all passed out, they was deprived of oxygen, the aircraft ran out of fuel and descended itself. So that's very different because that was after 3 or 4 hours of flight, and this one is very quick after the level off and the cruise, start of the cruise.
Chris Yates, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would be minded to agree with the comments on the Helios flight that ran out of fuel. And all the passengers, of course, had already passed out or had, in fact, lost their lives by that stage. The case is similar, but possibly not. We could be looking at a slow decompression in this case, but we have to wait to see for the final investigation, the details from the black boxes to be brought out and published accordingly before we can make that assertion.
All right, and you're seeing on those images of those helicopters that were going to and fro from the rescue site all afternoon until a short while ago, tells us our own Ben Barnier at the scene. I'm going to ask you this question, Pierre Duvade. An Airbus A320. Now, earlier we heard experts say it's a workhorse. What was it? There's one that takes off or lands every 3 seconds somewhere around the world. Nonetheless, because it does short-haul flights, that means it takes off and it lands more. Does that mean there's more pressure on the fuselage and the such?
These aircraft are really built for that. The kind of cycles that you have handling, landing and takeoffs and cruise and descent and so on is really taken into account in the design and the building of the aircraft and the maintenance of it. So you count the cycles, and really they are built for that. The only time I remember of a structural failure was not on an Airbus, it was on a Boeing 737, which was used in a salty environment in Hawaii, and they lost the top of the fuselage. That was years ago, and this is what could have happened at the time with an aircraft which was quite old and which was in a very specific environment.
Times have changed.
Yeah, time has changed, and this aircraft has been taken care of by a company like Lufthansa. You you cannot really say that they do a lot of funny things with aircraft.
Especially Lufthansa is very well known to be a very careful and proficient company.
Because there have been people saying, well, here we are, this is a low-cost carrier, and we've seen big strikes in France and in Germany. People saying, hey, if they're skimping on desserts and stuff, are they also skimping on safety?
Well, for one reason, because the actual Germanwings pilots, they are Lufthansa pilots, screened and hired by Lufthansa, that are going to fly for Germanwings, because at the moment they are transiting their medium short-haul fleet to Germanwings for cost issues. The same happens in France with Transavia, for example, or Up. But it's more a middle-cost Germanwings, like a bit EasyJet, rather than a very, very low-cost airline like Ryanair or Vueling. So it operates from big airports. It's very well maintained by operating state-of-the-art aircraft, maintained by well-known maintenance providers. So, well, that doesn't make it a low-cost airline, as everyone says so.
And you can count on Lufthansa pilots not to be positive on flying on aircraft they don't trust. They won't accept. They won't accept that.
They wouldn't accept it. And then, of course, if there is, I guess you could call it a silver lining, the story, and Chris Yates, I'm sure you've heard it, of this third division Swedish football team, which showed up at the airport, saw that there was perhaps another flight they could take, or a couple of other flights they could take, where they wouldn't have such a long of a stopover before they got home to Sweden, and at the very last minute backed out of boarding that plane. And it really shows up how much our traveling habits have changed. And here we are talking about a low-cost carrier, and it's almost like the way we've been talking about it the last 2 days. You realize that now taking the plane is like riding the bus, basically.
Yeah, indeed you do. And, of course, I have seen the story about the Swedish football team changing their flights quite dramatically, I suppose, but not so dramatically given that there are quite a number of other options to take. And eventually they took one of those which would save them some stopover time en route. So it does indicate that times are changing as far as travel is concerned.
And is it going to be, are we going to see, because there are more and more airplanes in the sky, are we going to see more and more accidents? Because now people don't hesitate to take the plane, even for domestic routes here in France.
No, I don't believe for one moment that there is a correlation between the number of air accidents that there have been recently and the possibility that this may increase over a period of time. There's nothing statistically to point to an indication that would be necessarily the case.
All right, so our flying habits are changing for the passengers. Flying habits are also changing for the pilots, Pierre Duval. And on that score, now, same as with cars, there's more and more automation in the plane. Do the pilots still have control of the when something goes wrong?
Yeah, but providing they have the right training for that. The thing is, you are trained for mastering systems now, more than mastering the airmanship of the aircraft. Airmanship is no longer the premium stuff that you look for when hiring the pilot. And actually, the selection.
So that pilot, for instance, who landed his plane on the Hudson, he was near retirement age.
Yeah.
He was a veteran flyer. Would a young pilot have been able to do that?
You never know. Actually, it was a kind of a process of taking the right decision at the right moment, and he applied what he had decided to do. And my hat off, as everybody has done to him and the co-pilot. Both of them were fantastic. I think that a lot of pilots would have been able to do the same stuff, but most of the pilots are not involved in any kind of accident of issue or incident during their career. I think that Sully, it was his first real big stuff in his career, and it was close to retiring.
And you're right. I mean, you pointed out the fact that they worked very well as a crew, and that was very important in that specific accident. And I think it also said, Sullenberger, that...
Okay, so if pilots today are, as Pierre says, more into management training rather than... Or, sorry, systems training.
Or crew resource management or cockpit resource management. You manage...
Are they prepared?
Absolutely prepared to do that.
Are they prepared for the emergency like the one we saw?
Yeah, so you work every 6 months, you go to the simulator and you work on every possible failures that you repeat time after time to get used to it and to be able to respond the correct way whenever that happens. That's basically what you learn to fly as a pilot. You learn to fly what we call in degraded modes. You never fly the normal cruise and normal landing. And then, as you said, there are some unexpected failures. There are failures that are not written in books. And then you need to generate options and to be creative sometimes. You don't always respond to the failures that occurs according to the book. Sometimes you have to be creative.
All right. And as we heard from that investigator at the outset of that press conference earlier here in Paris, for now, the mystery remains complete. I want to thank you, Jean-Baptiste Djebari. I want to thank Pierre Duval, Chris Yates for being with us from Manchester. Stay with us, though.